Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, Episode 94.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of T.I.M.E, Doppelt So Clever, and Carcassonne Star Wars. We've got a 6-pack review and an on-tap for Wingspan, and then Jake has a beer segment about low-carb beer options. Finally, we discuss our experience at the Whose Turn Is It Anyway convention in Durham, North Carolina. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Look it, all is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
With some tasteful bird puns.
We like bird puns at all times.
Let's just set this up front. So by the way, listeners, we are going to be talking about Wingspan, a bird-based release from Stonemaier Games today.
I said that a minute ago.
I know. But Danielle, I want to set some ground rules. How many bird puns am I allowed to make in this episode?
2.
2? That's it?
2.
I don't know if that's going to fly.
1.
Fine. All right, so hey, welcome everybody to this episode of Draft Mechanic. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, we love all of you returning listeners and all of those people out there in the world that are, I guess, in between. Is there an in? There's no in between there. Oh man, we are off the rails. I'm sorry. Birds just kind of do that to me. So, if you would like to get more information on Draft Mechanic, you can go to our website, draftmechanic.net, or at Draft Mechanic on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of your usual social media places.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild, that is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode, so if we're saying something and you're like, hey, I need to tell them something about that, or you want to tell the rest of our listeners, that is the place to do it. Mm-hmm. Also, right now, there is a different thread that is up there that we need you guys to check out.
Yes. So we have actually decided to plan in advance for an episode here, which is always exciting. But 2 episodes from now, the first episode of March, we are doing Expandapalooza 2. We did an Expandapalooza episode a while back where we talked about Scythe and Terraforming Mars and Tosh Kalar expansions, and we have so many new exciting expansions to talk about right now that we figured it's time to bring that back. So if you go over to the Board Game Geek Guild, guild number 2470, there is a poll in there that lists some of the expansions we have on our shelf, and we are interested to know what you most want us to talk about. So go ahead and vote for the ones you are most excited about, and we will fit in probably about the top 3 out of that. We have some other expansions that we have already fixed in that are not in the poll, so if something is noticeably missing, just hope that we have it already. And if not, then we don't have that game. Also, at the top of the episode, I always like to throw a shout-out to those who have picked up the Draft Mechanic micro badge. We have a micro badge available on Board Game Geek. If you want to get it, you can go to our guild and find the pinned thread there that says, hey, if you need Geek Gold, it's right here. But the biggest crop of micro badgers this particular time, or biggest herd of micro badgers?
I don't know what the plural
Crowd?
for badgers is.
Yeah, the largest pinning of micro badgers. How about that?
Before we get to listing them, I do want to thank Patrick Hillier for the adorable micro badger image that he created. It is very cute if you happen to see it on Twitter.
So, 12 new micro badgers, bringing us up to almost 70 micro badgers. My goal originally was to get 100 by episode 100. This is episode 94. And if we get 12-ish, 10 to 12-ish each episode, I think we're going to be able to do this thing. So, thank you to David Cachon, Blair46, John Hengler, Derek Davis, Brandon Pickett, Ian Wallace-Moyer, Matt in Ohio, Brad Bryce, Adam Cribbas, Dennis Parsons, John Sanitar, and Jared R. Thank you all so very much for picking up the Draft Mechanic micro badge. We really appreciate it.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we run twice monthly game nights. Our next one is going to be on February 7th at Good Road Cider Works. Mm-hmm. Our game nights are on the first Thursday of every month at Good Road Cider Works and on the third Tuesday of every month at Salud Cerveceria. So the next one coming up is going to be the Good Road one this coming Thursday if you're listening to this when it drops.
I'm really excited about this as well because the Game Designers of North Carolina Charlotte chapter decided that they're going to start having one of their monthly meetups at our monthly meetup at Good Road. So
Such meetups.
You're going to see a lot of local Charlotte game designers, which is awesome because then you get to see kind of behind the scenes process of that kind of stuff. If you've never seen game design in process before, come and check it out. It should be a lot of fun. We've, had some prototype and game design stuff there at PASS, which I guess is why we have this event coming out for this one as well. So
and if you have seen prototyping before, come out and do some playtesting for these guys.
Play some games. So 2 bits of game news, both coming out of the Nuremberg Toy Fair. These are both things that I saw on Board Game Geek's Twitter account that I feel are very relevant to our particular show. First off, the 20th anniversary of the Alea line of games from Ravensburger is going to lead to new editions of 2 of their most popular titles. The first one that everybody is all agog about, of course, is Castles of Burgundy. And it looks like, finally, after all these years, Castles of Burgundy is getting a much-needed facelift.
It's a great game already, but one of the main complaints you always hear about Castles of Burgundy is that the art is just not up to par with the game. Mm-hmm. And the new photos that they've shown, or not photos, but like the concept art that they've shown and everything, is much, much more refined and awesome looking than the current edition if you have any of the last several years worth of Castles of Burgundy.
So I'm very excited to see this, not only for the new art, but apparently it's also going to include a bunch of the expansion content. Castles of Burgundy has had a lot of small expansions through the years of different boards or different tiny little modules you can add on that have always, from what I understand, been kind of hard to find. So to see all of that combined into one box is pretty exciting, and I could see wanting to add this to your collection if you already have Castles of Burgundy. There are obviously people out there that have collected a whole bunch of the previous expansion stuff, and at that point probably don't need it as much. The other one, and this is the one that I am more excited about, is Las Vegas, but not specifically just Las Vegas or Vegas dice game that it's been available here in the US from Target for like $10 in a little die-shaped box, but they are calling it Las Vegas Royale, and apparently this is not only including Las Vegas in an updated art style and updated kind of board setup, but apparently also includes the expansion content from Las Vegas Boulevard, the kind of hard-to-find expansion that I was able to import from, I think, Board Game Bliss at one point. But not just that, they're apparently changing some of the base mechanics of the game in interesting ways. The shot that I saw from the Nuremberg Toy Fair picture on BGG's Twitter is something that looks like interchangeable casinos that have different setup rules. And to me, that's really exciting because that means that this is not just a remake of Las Vegas, which I'm always I'm a big fan of Las Vegas, I enjoy it, but if they are actually going to change the way that each of the casinos works, I feel like that is exciting enough news to really look into this when it comes to the States here. I'm hoping that it gets here without too much delay. I know you over there are tired of me buying copies of Las Vegas.
We have 2 already.
Yeah, so, I mean, what it comes down to for me is if this game plays significantly different than Vegas plus the Las Vegas Boulevard expansion, then I'll look into, finding a way to fit it in or trade stuff out. But if it is just the same as Las Vegas and Las Vegas Boulevard, I have no need for it whatsoever. But the fact that they are coming back to the table with these 2 games is pretty dang exciting to me.
I don't recall if you mentioned it, but this is also getting an art facelift as well, correct?
Oh, yeah, significantly. And it looks like it comes with like a big old dice rolling tray in the center, which is kind of nice. And then instead of just 6 tiles for casinos, you can make this interlocking hexagonal board
looks
around the dice tray. Looks a little bit like World's Fair. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, I don't know. It looks really cool. I'm hoping that the gameplay has been updated to make me want this thing in the collection because I love Las Vegas. I know you're not a huge fan, but
it's fine.
Yeah. I love Las Vegas, and it's always a good crowd pleaser when we have a bigger group.
But not all of the news is coming from Ravensburger. There is one other piece of news that we've come across recently that I know you and I are both very excited about, but also a little skeptical. Mm-hmm.
So, longtime listeners of the show would know that we are very infatuated with the time stories here. We've been playing every single one. We've done a spoiler episode after every scenario, and we are eagerly looking forward to Madame that comes out apparently Q1, but
sometime this year.
At some point, allegedly soon. But we knew in advance that Madame, this scenario number 9, was going to be the end of, quote-unquote, the white cycle of boxes, which is pretty much this storyline arc that we've been in so far that, managed well or not, has definitely had at least a continuous story-ish. More on that in the spoiler episodes, of course, if you would like it. But what we did see out of Nuremberg Toy Fair is a picture of the first of the Blue series, the Blue cycle of boxes, and this is called a Midsummer Night. It takes place in, quote-unquote, AT, alternate time, and there's Pan on the cover, so you can pretty much assume you know what the source material here is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, alternate timeline in this case is going to be probably drawing specifically from Midsummer Night's Dream, I would assume.
The details that we've seen about this, obviously it stands out right off the front that the box cover is way more illustrated rather than just a simple object on a white background. It's got really luxurious, colorful art of 3 different characters.
Yeah, I was going to say characters at all.
And the difference that I noticed that really surprised me is it is now called Time Stories Revolution, is the title of the box. Time Stories Revolution, Midsummer Night. So what we know about this so far is that these are all going to be standalone boxes that you don't have to have a console box for. So no, you don't need to buy the original giant white box of Time Stories to play one of these scenarios. They may or may not be connected. We're not really sure if they're going to have a blue story, a blue cycle storyline, but they have said that they can be played in any order. So that means, I guess, if there is a unifying story or something, maybe there's just different pieces you'll get out of different ones and you can learn it in any order.
Much as I was a little bit hesitant when they said that there's not going to be a console or an order that these need to be played in, because we were, for quite a time, really excited about the meta storyline of Time Stories. I think we have, within our group, varying opinions of that at this point. But the idea that there wasn't going to be a specific order in which you were supposed to do these, at first I was like, that seems a little weird. But then I realized it's probably a really smart decision for them, because how many times have we heard people talk about what they want out of a Time Stories box? And there are people who want puzzles. And for them, Asylum is pretty much the gold standard of Time Stories boxes. There are a couple that come close, but Asylum is like the big puzzly one. And there are some that wanted story. There are some that wanted character development and the differences in the character to matter. And if they don't have to be played in any specific order, you can start with the one once they are, once there's more than one out. You can start with whichever one appeals to what you want to get out of Time Stories. I feel like from a business model, this is a lot smarter, but from an exciting storytelling model, I'm a little hesitant to be like, how are you going to make a cohesive story with this if you can do it in any order? And maybe they're going to. I'm not going to doubt them before I know anything about it, other than the fact that it is theoretically based on Shakespeare. Again, I don't actually know that, but if it's not, then they got real close without hitting that mark. I'm interested to see what they're going to do, but I'm not necessarily as gung-ho as I have been about all the Time Stories since the beginning.
Yeah. The other detail that we noticed from what was online is they're apparently also going to have a shorter play time, which is surprising because we've kind of found all of them in that 3 to 4 hour time span to be pretty good. Obviously, there are a few that were way longer.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've definitely played at least 2 that I can think of that were 6 hours.
Yeah. And well, I mean, I think Brotherhood of the Coast was a 4-hour game. We played it for 6 hours.
Right, but Asylum took us the better part of 5 hours.
I guess
and,
so.
What was it?
Prophecy of Dragons
took
was
us
the big
6
one.
plus.
Yeah. And apparently they're going to focus more on the characters, which is the only word that it says in here. And I don't know what that means particularly. I assume that means you're not going to be doing as much puzzling and more character development, which will again be a very big turn for those who have enjoyed that particular part of Time Stories. I guess putting it with this new title, Time Stories Revolution, means that we can expect something to be significantly different about it, other than the fact that the box isn't white anymore.
Have you guys heard about Escape Tales?
Hey, by the way, everybody, Escape Tales: The Awakening, available from Board and Dice, just hit the U.S. shores. It is available online for $25, and it was our favorite game of the year last year.
I say that because if you have not listened to any of our episodes talking about Escape Tales, it is a very puzzly, Time Stories-esque type of game. It is a one playthrough, but it is definitely puzzle heavy. So if what you loved about Time Stories was the super puzzly aspect of it, and if Time Stories is moving towards a more character-driven format for the second arc, you might want to check out Escape Tales.
It's so good. Go play Escape Tales. Now available. Get it from stores and
Not
places.
for children.
Definitely not for children.
Moving on.
Moving on. Danielle, it is time to talk about Kickstarters. We have a big old pile of updates for this one.
Yeah, some of our Kickstarters from the episode 2 episodes ago hadn't quite wrapped up last episode, so I have about 2 episodes of wrap-ups to update everyone on.
Wrap it up.
Vital Lacerda's Railways of Portugal from Eagle Griffin Games has finished with its funding reaching $56,040 of its $10,000 goal with 951 backers. This is a Railways of the World expansion.
Yep, map.
You know what you're getting there. If not, go back and listen to the last 2 episodes. War of the Worlds, the new wave from Grey Fox Games, has funded with $126,942 of its also $10,000 goal with 1,997 backers.
Nice.
Suburbia Collector's Edition from Bezier Games is currently funding at $861,520 of its also $10,000 goal, with 6,257 backers. This one ends on February 12th, so there is still time to check it out.
I feel like it's safe to say that one's going to break 1 million with that much time to go.
We shall have to wait and see. Rival Restaurants from Gap Closer Games is funding at $120,000 of its $30,000 goal, with 1,666 backers ending on February 19th. They have 14 stretch goals unlocked, with component upgrades, extra chefs, restaurants, and new recipes. And finally, Tiny Dice Buddies Apparels from Double Feature is funding at $2,273 of its oddly $392 goal. I'm guessing that was a converted from
No,
$392. Okay.
Hey, it's a very precise goal of what she needed to get it done.
With 41 backers ending on February 15th, there are 7 designs and more colors to choose from, so they've unlocked a couple of those stretch goals there as well.
Yeah, go check them out. They're super cute.
They are.
All right, so new projects. First up, coming from Formal Ferret Games, we have High Rise. This is launching today on Kickstarter as of today, the day of release, which is the 4th of February.
Yes, February 4th.
I figure I should probably clarify that for those who are listening in the future of me talking, which I guess is everybody.
I mean, I'm listening now.
You are okay. So Daniel, this is going to launch tomorrow.
Cool.
You know. Okay. So this is going to go until the end of February with an estimated delivery of November 2019. High Rise will have 2 pledge levels, $99 for the game, plus shipping charged afterwards, or $400 to include shipping, and you also get to name one of the streets on the board. So I feel like I should talk about what High Rise is if you have not already heard the buzz of High Rise or listened to our Gen Con wrap-up. This is a new design from Gil Hova over at Formal Ferret Games. It's a 2 to 4 player city building game. You're going to be taking 3 laps around this really cool long-shaped board that looks like an island of sorts in New York.
It's secretly a big rondelle.
Yes, and it's, like you said, a secret giant rondelle action-similar mechanic that kind of plays like Glenmore or Tokaido, where whoever the furthest player back is the next person to go. So if you are at the back of the action selection thingy, you can choose to take steps one at a time. If you're at the front, you can choose to step just a little bit or take a huge jump out knowing that other people are going to get more actions than you. What is the point of all this movement other than having fun on a giant rondelle, you say?
What is the point of all this movement other than having fun on a giant rondelle, I say?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because you are going to be collecting resources and then going to building spaces to build skyscrapers around this very long city board. Depending on where you build and depending on the blueprints available, you have the opportunity to gain bonus floors to make your buildings even taller and also get special contract powers and special bonuses and tweaks like that that help you build bigger buildings faster. So, depending on how you build and when you build, you're going to be choosing very wisely for added bonuses and powers to make your buildings just the biggest buildings of all time. So this game is obviously $99 for shipping. It's going to come with over 300 plastic city floor building pieces. So that's a lot of where the cost comes in. It's a very expensive game to produce in terms of the variety and quantity of these components. And we actually had a chance to play this back at Gen Con. We did a play test with Gil Hova and some other people, and he, watched us play and tweaked points here and there as we were playing. If you want to hear more information about that particular play, check out our Gen Con wrap-up episode from last year, and we talk about it near the very end. But I've been really, really excited for this game pretty much since before Gen Con when I first heard about it, and our play at Gen Con just cemented it even more for me because every decision that I had in that play of High Rise felt fun and rewarding, and I really like the way he's incentivized you to do the fun things rather than making it a game that you have to battle against the rules to get things done.
Not only is the game a really fun time, but if you want to look at the art that has been put up for this campaign, it is absolutely gorgeous. He has some very pretty Quanchai Moria art that is going to be not only on the box cover but on the board, and it's just going to breathe flavor into this game that is already a super fun game. I also enjoyed the playthrough that we had, and you can go listen to my thoughts in that episode as well. But it is an excellent production of a game that was already super fun, and I'm really excited to get this back to our table.
Another thing that I really enjoyed, obviously at the end of some rounds you're going to have scoring rounds where you're scored based on how big your buildings are. One thing that Gil wanted to do was have ultra-friendly ties in this game, so maybe if you're scoring everybody's buildings and somebody's got a 14 and then there's 2 people with a 12 and then one person just got like 2 11s done, everybody at each of the steps is going to score those points. And what that means is not only does the tallest one get the first player points, but whoever the second players are, if they are all tied, they all get it. And if you tie with yourself more than once at the same level, you get points for each of the buildings. I love that, and playing that really made it even more exciting to me because I never was about to take a build and just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to beat them, so this is a waste of my resources. Anytime I built something, I was going to get rewarded for it in one way or another, and tying other players or not even beating out another player wasn't something that hindered me from doing more and having more fun with the game. So we will obviously be tracking this in the Kickstarter updates, but I highly encourage everybody out there to go take a look at High Rise. Formal Ferret Games has a great track record with Wordsy, the Networks. Battle Merchants was another Gil Hova design put out from Minion Games, so he's got the design pedigree. This production looks like it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to be there, I guess today, as you're hearing me, to check that out. And that is High Rise, available on Kickstarter today. Ooh. Next up, from Asmati Games, we have 1001 Odysseys. This is currently funding at $84,000 of its $50,000 goal with 1,119 backers. This one will be ending on February 28th, so the end of the month, and you will have an estimated delivery of March 2020 on this. That seems so far away, but that is just next year.
Yeah, it's like 14 months from now.
Yeah, 2020. Wow.
13 maybe.
Whew. Anyway, so $75 to get a copy of 1001 Odysseys, and if you want some cool swag like a plush plumpkin...
And a pin with a pumpkin on it, and a bunch of other... Just
awesomely
swag.
Adorable
Swag was
stuff.
the right word.
$115 will add in that stuff as well. So this is a narrative-based cooperative adventure for up to 4 players, taking kind of a Miyazaki-inspired space adventure. Each storybook of the game is divided into chapters to play in 30 to 60 minutes, and the base game will include 4 storybooks with 6 to 10 chapters each. So you're getting a lot of content out of that. That's a math that I don't want to do right now.
It's at least 12 to 20 hours, depending on how many chapters.
I mean, that is a lot of content. I got a chance to walk by and take a peek at this at PAX Unplugged, and I will say right off, the art for this is unbelievably cute. When I say Miyazaki-inspired, you think of Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, things like that. Yeah, Totoro. That art, that kind of surrealistic art, is just all over this. And so much of the art is done with watercolors, which is such a wildly different style than what you see in a lot of board gaming. And in addition to that, the amount of gameplay and content that there is in here, combined with these pretty bite-sized chunked. I mean, 30 to 60 minutes for a sit-down, adventure. You can hit a few of those at a time, and you got a lot of content available in this box.
Yeah, I remember seeing people playing this game when I was in the Asmati Games room at Gen Con, because I was there for One Deck Galaxy. I didn't actually get a chance to play this, but just looking over across the room and seeing people play this game, everybody was having a great time, and that was before it got another, 8 months of, about 6 months of refinement since then to get to the point that they're at now, and I'm sure before the end of the delivery, so March 2020, they're going to improve it at least a little bit more. It was fun to watch people play back then, and I'm sure it's even better now.
I know that they have a lot of stretch goals planned, so this thing is able to take off funding in the future. They're going to add more content and hopefully some other component upgrades, so I'm really excited to see that. This is something that's been on my radar for a while, and kind of like High Rise, it's one of those, I was there day one. This is something I'm immediately excited to get going. Get going on? Getting going. Get to.
Bye.
Get to buy. All right, well, that is 1001 Odysseys. Weird fumbling at the end there notwithstanding, I encourage you to check it out. Finally, we have Reunification, a letter-writing game about reconciliation. This is done by Travis Hill and Presspot Games. It's currently funding at $1,294 of its $500 goal with 95 backers. This one ends on February 21st with an estimated delivery of May 2019. This is an experimental one-shot RPG for 3 to 5 players where each player is going to take on the role of one member of a family split apart due to civil war. Throughout the game, you're going to be asking questions of one another on scraps of paper to build familiarity, compassion, and empathy between you and your estranged family members. Gameplay is all done on these scraps of paper, simulating letters you're passing or sending to the other players, and you're actually never going to openly converse during gameplay. That means no talking, no facial expressions, none of that stuff. You're simply using words and questions to communicate that around to each of the players. Another really interesting thing here is that the art for this is done by Annette Villa, who's Netters Plays. You may see see her around the board game media sphere. I
Definitely.
didn't realize that she was such an artist, but the art on this is really well-fitting and well done and perfect for the material that it's paired with. So Travis's goal with this is to create a lo-fi pocket RPG that can be distributed pretty cheaply. By the way, pledge levels on this, it's $5 to get the PDF, $10 to get a physical version of the zine mailed to you, and then for $18 you get one to you, and he will also send one to a library or community organization free of charge. I love that. That is the level that I backed at, because I'm all about distributing cool content to cool places.
I'm really excited to see how this plays, because a while back, One Shot did a letter writing RPG called Dear Elizabeth that had won the 200-word RPG challenge recently. And it was really interesting to see a medium like RPG, which is usually so much about the in-the-moment interaction between the characters, taken to a letter-writing perspective. So I'm interested to see how this different theme and ostensibly different mechanics, because it's a different game, will take that particular interesting feature of an RPG that I have heard before and take it to a new level. I'm interested to see how he's going to do this.
Cool. Well, we will find out in May, because that's apparently when you're going to be able to get a copy of Reunification. Well, that brings us to the end of this particular episode of Kickstarters. It definitely looks like the Kickstarter wave is about to start building up again. I know that there is a number of projects that are going to be launching in and throughout February, so I'm sure we will be talking about some of those as it continues.
It's kind of what we do.
But how about we do the other thing, where we talk about games we've actually played?
Let's do it.
Let's move on to the recent plays.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts.
So at the end of the episode today, we're going to be talking about our experience at Whose Turn Is It Anyway, a little convention we went to up in Durham, North Carolina. But while we were there, we got a chance to play a lot of games that we wouldn't usually be able to get our hands on. And one of these was a game called T.I.M.E. This is a 2018 release from Game Right Games. Plays 2 to 6 players in about 5 to 10 minutes. It's designed by Natalie Saunier, Remy Saunier, and Thomas Voirchex, with art by the same 3 people. This is a game of pattern recognition, dexterity, and your brain never working quite fast enough.
I will say, this isn't a game that we wouldn't have been able to get our hands on, because we definitely bought it while we were sitting there playing it.
Very true.
Off of, I think, Amazon you got it off of. It's just a game we never would have, it wouldn't have not ever crossed our radar, I don't think. In T.I.M.E, you have a deck of cards which has patterns on each side of each card. The patterns on the front and back of each card are going to be different. But each pattern shows up at least twice throughout the deck on one of the sides of one of the cards. Some patterns show up 3 times throughout the deck, but most of them show up twice. Everybody's going to take a portion of the deck, and they're going to be flipping the cards out to the center of the table. There are 3 different versions of this game. There is a competitive version, a team version, and a cooperative version. In each of the 3 versions, the goal of the game is for you to find patterns that match each other, and some of them are real close even when they don't match. And you're going to want to touch both cards that have the same pattern. If you are able to put a finger on each of the 2 cards, or possibly 3 cards that have the same pattern, you take those cards and you put them in front of you. If you get a pair and there is a 3rd card that comes out that has the same pattern, somebody is able to put their hand on that 3rd card and also your pile of collected pair, and then they can take all of the cards from you. In the competitive version, you play just till one person has 5 pair of cards or trios of cards in front of them. In the team version, one person will put their finger on one of the matching cards and their teammate has to put their finger on the other one, and once they're both touching one of the cards, one of you can take that pair and put it in front of them. You're playing to a total of 5 pairs of cards. And in the cooperative version, there is a timer, and you're going to flip it over, and you're trying to get a certain number of pairs or trios in the allotted time, which I believe is 60 seconds. So you're just trying to see how many of these matches that you can find by flipping over the cards and just making sure that you can pick up both of the cards. It is surprisingly difficult, I will say. And because the patterns are, so very vivid and bold, they are bright colors, they are often very similar, like I said earlier. Like, there's one that has the signs that would be outside a restroom, and some of them are men and some of them are women. And if you touch one of the ones that has a repeating male pattern and one that has a repeating female pattern, that's not a match, and you need to take one of the pairs in front of you and put it back out into the field for somebody else to get, or possibly for yourself to get, but people are going to be watching for you to drop those cards. Whoever completes the objective of whichever method of T.I.M.E you're playing first is the winner. Or if you're playing cooperatively, you just, based on how many pairs you get.
You win as much as you think you did.
You score.
Yeah, so this is the kind of game that we never would have picked up on our own, but W. Eric Martin happened to be carrying around this and a few other tiny small box games and just kind of pulled it out and was like, all right, we're going to play this thing. Let's see what it is. And it is such a wacky, kind of crazy panic fun for every game. 5 minutes is an overstatement. It was 2 to 3 minutes per round of the competitive one. But it brings a lot of the feeling that we love so much about Monster Match, for example, where there's a condition, you have to find it, and then you have to touch that thing. So it's not just whoever can physically move the fastest, but it's also about who can recognize the pattern or see it the quickest. So obviously you're going to have concerns with if you have some kind of motor skills or color blindness issues. Those are things you're going to need to be aware of. But there is also a variant that instead of real time, you take turns flipping over cards and everybody gets to respond at the same time. The way we played it was just start flipping over cards until you see pairs and kind of that craziness like that.
Yeah, the patterns are different shapes, not just different colors. So if you have a color blindness issue and not a motor skills issue, this should still be playable. You may be at a disadvantage, obviously, because everybody else will be able to see the differences in color. But they are different enough that I think that you should be able to play with this.
Yeah.
If you do have somebody who is slower in motor skills, for any number of reasons, possibly just because they're small children.
Yeah.
This may not be a great one for you. But because this is like Monster Match where you're all reacting to the same condition, but the condition is constantly changing, it is just so much harder to wrap your mind around. And I think that additional challenge is what makes it fun.
Yeah.
If this were just like finding matching patterns one at a time with any time that you wanted, it wouldn't be fun. You'd be like, oh, I see a pattern. We're done.
I have a feeling that this is also going to appeal to fans of games like Ghost Blitz or Stroop, which are those kind of brain-bendy concepts where you're having to recognize patterns and colors and shapes in a weird way that's not how your brain is usually tuned to them. I was amazed at how frequently I just got a card lost. Like, I had one card of a pair, and I looked at the other card, and I went back to the other one, and I just could not find it, because once these cards get out there, and the table is so full of cards, the colors are just so glashing and so distracting that it's going to really be a challenge for you to see those pairs and keep a track of them.
It's also entirely possible that somebody flipped the card over.
Yeah, that's true. Since every card is different on the backside, and it's not like cards with side A all have the same side B, it's all mixed up. Like, no card is the same as the other on the other side. So you flip over a card, and whatever you were looking at is going to be gone.
You can also play off the top of other players' decks before they flip the cards over. So if another player is looking at what's out on the field trying to find a pattern and they haven't flipped over their top card yet, you may be able to just poach off the top of their deck with something that you know you've been looking for if you've seen it out in the field. Assuming that you can find that card still.
Yeah, it's rare that I order a game immediately while playing, but this is such a low price point, and it's such silly fun that I just immediately, like, we need to have this thing. This is perfect for going to game night. It's perfect for a game night warm-up or a closer as well. And yeah, I'm just a big fan of it. Twin it.
Well, next I think we need to take a little bit of a field trip.
Where are we going to go, Danielle?
I don't know, Jake. Where are we going?
I think we're going into the CarcaZone!
You're correct.
I was so ready for that this time. Thank you.
We got a chance to play Carcassonne Star Wars.
Star Wars.
The zone in space.
And I'm going to do my very best not to call it Carcassonne Star Trek, but if I do that at least once or twice during this, it will be par for the course in our discussions about this game. So, Carcassonne Star Wars is a 2015 release from Handsome Gluck, which plays 2 to 5 players in 35 minutes. It is, unsurprisingly, designed by Klaus-Jürgen Werder.
No.
We don't talk about the artists because this is Disney, and I guess they don't feel the need to credit their artists. And this is a game of Carcassonne and Star Wars, and also tile laying because it's Carcassonne.
So Carcassonne Star Wars, on the surface, is not too terribly different from most Carcassones. You have your tiles that have different features on them. You have roads are replaced by space trade routes, and you have cities are replaced by, like, nebula fields or asteroid fields or something. And then the monasteries have been replaced by planets. And you're going to, just like any other Carcassonne, you're going to take a tile, flip it over, you're going to add it on to the existing field with any features matching when you touch 2 tiles together. You then get the choice to place one of your meeples, which are all different specific Star Wars peoples. Like, you have a Luke Skywalker and a Yoda and a Darth Vader Stormtrooper and a Boba Fett.
I was Boba Fett always because he's orange.
And they actually all have different factions. Remember that for later. You'll be able to figure out the factions pretty easily there. But you're going to choose to place a meeple, and once features are completed, you will score them. The asteroid fields and the space trade routes function pretty much like cities and roads do in normal Carcassonne. If you complete an asteroid field and you're in there, you get 2 points per tile. If you're completing a space lane, you get 1 point per tile, just like you do with cities and roads. The way it's different here is that a lot of the tiles are going to have faction symbols on them. You have the rebels, you have the Imperials, and then you have the rogues. The Boba Fetts of the world, the rogue people. And those faction symbols are worth 2 extra points per symbol in each of those features. So if your city has 2 extra faction symbols in it, asteroid field has 2 faction symbols in it, you get 4 additional points there, so on and so forth. The planets also have a faction symbol on them, which will matter for combat. And yes, I just said combat in a Carcassonne game, which is the weirdest thing about this game.
In fairness, we've had combat before in a Carcassonne game. It was just generally catapult-centric.
That was just accidental hitting with catapult tiles. So the combat in Carcassonne Star Wars is kind of the most interesting difference about this one. If at any point a feature merges with 2 different people's meeples on it, usually in base Carcassonne you would just, whoever has majority would be the one who wins, but in this one, you actually go to a dice roll combat.
A Star War, perhaps?
A Star War. You will have a war in the space. Based on the size of your meeple, you have regular meeple and you have large meeple. You will roll 1 or 2 dice, and then you can also get an additional die roll for each of your faction symbols that are on that particular feature. So if you had your Luke Skywalker was on a planet and it had a Rebels symbol on it, you would get 1 additional die to roll for that particular combat. If you have multiple of your faction symbols on your trade route or asteroid field, you only get 1 extra die, so you're never rolling more than 3 dice. And then, it's not a combination of your dice together that is your combat score, it is whatever your highest die is the one that you will evaluate combat with. Therefore, it's entirely possible with somebody with 1 die to beat a player rolling 3 dice, which happened more than once in our gameplay of this game.
Certainly.
It was really kind of an interesting thing to add there. Oh, obviously, you go until the end of the game, all the tiles are gone, and then you score up, however, and get a bunch of points, and somebody is the best space war person. But it was really interesting to bring this combat into Carcassonne in a way that I never really would have thought about, but makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's specifically needs to be Star Wars to do combat in the future in Carcassonne, but I mean, for this particular one, it worked well enough. You've got 3 factions, you've got 5 different characters. Boba Fett is in his own faction, so if you play team play, you can't use Boba Fett, or Boba Fett is just in there and disadvantaged because there's only one of him. But, I don't know, it's weird and different.
One of the things that I thought was even neater about obviously, the idea of combat in a Carcassonne game is fairly novel, but the way that the combat worked was particularly interesting because if you win the combat, you maintain control of the feature. If you lose the combat, you remove your meeple from that feature, but you gain points equal to the number of dice that you rolled.
Oh, yeah.
So it's entirely possible that you could do a combat on a feature where you were only going to get 4 points maybe, and if you had your faction symbol and your large meeple, you could lose the combat and still end up with 3 points. When you lose a battle, you're not losing the entirety of what you've invested in that feature, and I think that's why this feels okay, because it is luck-based. It's just whoever has the highest die roll, and because there's already a fair bit of luck in Carcassonne in what you draw and where you're able to put your meeples. If it were just you're screwed out of it if you roll bad, that wouldn't be fun. It would be frustrating, and it would not make me want to play this game again. But because you can strategically place your large meeple on something that has your faction symbol, which means A, it is more likely that you'll be able to protect it and get the full points, but also if you don't succeed in doing that, you'll get a decent number of points anyway. So you can sort of hedge your bets when you're doing that. One of the things you mentioned is the way that you're able to initiate combat on planets, because obviously you can't connect a planet to another part of a planet, they're all on one tile, is that if you are placing a tile adjacent to a planet, so what would be one of the monastery squares in a normal game, instead of placing your meeple onto the tile you placed, you may sort of jump it over onto the planet and initiate combat with your starship space things, I guess.
Space lasers. Oh, I will also say there's no farmers in this game, so that gets points from Danielle.
Woo!
So yeah, Star Wars Carcassonne is an oddity, and I enjoyed playing it. I don't particularly want this game because A, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, and B, it's not different enough from other Carcassonnes to make me really want to bring it out regularly. But the concept of combat in Carcassonne is a really interesting takeaway, and I would love to find a way to play that in other kinds of Carcassonne. As we were sitting here talking about it just now, I would really like to replace the way that you steal other people's meeples using the tower expansion with something like this. You use the towers for a chance at combat in a feature, and then have the opportunity to replace somebody. Like, that seems like a cool way to make the tower less bad.
Dumb question.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it while you were talking. Could you not play this with Carcassonne Safari?
I don't know.
There's enough baobab trees in Carcassonne Safari to sort of equal out the number of planets. Because in normal Carcassonne, there are far fewer monasteries than there are planets in Star Wars Carcassonne. Almost did it that time. So there's more baobab trees in Star Wars Safari, in Carcassonne Safari. And you have the birds that are on the forest areas.
Okay.
And animal symbols that are on roads or anything. You could use that like the faction symbols. They're about as frequent.
I want to be the bird faction.
I mean...
That wasn't a pun. You can't get me for that one.
No,
Okay.
that's fine. Star Wars Carcassonne is very difficult to find. It is not in production anymore. It was never released in the US as far as I can tell. Like, the Hans im Glück version is the version. So you're probably not going to find this. If you do, give it a shot. But if not, maybe you can play it with Carcassonne Safari.
Yeah. Or just, wherever you want. Just bring 6 dice to the table. You got this. Yeah, so that was an interesting little diversion into the CarcaZone that I really would not have expected to have the opportunity to go to, but thankfully somebody at Whose Turn Is It Anyway had a copy, and we had a chance to play it a few times, so we could talk about it today. So if you have Star Wars Carcassonne, cool.
Yeah, this was one of the ones that we didn't think we were going to get to be able to do for this, because we weren't going to pay, exorbitant import prices for it.
Oh, the Star Wars tax.
But hey, we got it into that zone.
There it is. Moving right along, another game we had an opportunity to play at Whose Turn Is It Anyway is one that I woke up that morning expecting to play, but only as an app. But we also had an opportunity to play a physical copy of Doppelt So Clever. This is the sequel to Ganz Schön Clever, or That's Pretty Clever, which is what will be the U.S. name of it. Which,
Twice as clever is the U.S. name of Doppelt So Clever.
It is. It definitely does feel twice as clever. So this is a 2019 release from Schmidt Spiele. Plays 1 to 4 players in about 30 minutes, designed by Wolfgang Warsch. It's a roll and write game with tactical bonusing. Danielle, Doppelt at me.
Okay, so if you've played Ganz Schön Clever, a lot of the mechanics of Doppelt So Clever are going to sound really, really familiar. You have 6 different colored dice, 1 white die, and then you've got, yellow, pink, green, blue,
gray,
and silver.
Sorry.
And you're going to roll all of these dice at the beginning of your turn. You are going to look at them, and you're going to decide which one you're going to take. Depending on what color you take, you are then going to mark off a space on your scoreboard. Each of the different colored sections of the scoreboard will score differently. So, for example, you can put any number in the pink section, but you are going to want to put numbers above the number indicated on some of the squares in that section in order to get additional bonuses. The green section, you are going to be subtracting the second number in a pair from the first number in a pair, and they may be multiplied depending on the notations on the squares. And then the difference is going to be the number of points that you get. The blue section is going to work similar to Ganz Schön Clever, where you're adding the blue and white dice together, but you are trying to perpetually decrease the number that you're writing into the blue section. The yellow section, you need to mark off each square twice in order to score it at the end of the game. And the silver section, you are going to be marking not only the silver die that you take, but any dice below that in number. So say you take a silver 4 and you had a blue 2 and a green 3, you would mark any number 4, you would mark a green 3 and a blue 2 off on that track, and you're trying to get not only a lot of numbers in the same color, but also if you get a lot of the same number, if you complete all of the 4 colors in that, you're going to get a bonus for that. So once you select one of your dice, you are going to place it in your used section, but any dice that are lower than that die in value are going to be placed up for the other players to use at the end of your turn. You are going to then roll any remaining dice that are not in your used section or on the platter that is available for the other players at the end of the turn. And once you've selected 3 dice in this manner to place into your used section and to mark off on your scoreboard, the other players will have the option to take any one of the dice that are available on that platter and mark it somewhere on their board in the correct color, or if you have the white die up there, anywhere on the board, because the white die is wild. There is one new thing that is added in the bonuses that you can gain in Doppelt So Clever. In the original Ganz Schön Clever, you had a couple of extra things you could earn. You had rerolls that you could earn by marking off certain spaces. bonuses, and that allowed you to just essentially re-roll the whole handful of dice that you had rolled on that turn if the numbers didn't work out well for you. And you also had these +1s that allowed you to take another die on either your turn or another player's turn at the end of the turn and mark that even though it was not one of the 3 that you had selected or wasn't the one you had selected off the platter. They've added a third bonus that you can get, which is you can take one of the dice that has been placed on your platter and you can add it back into the dice pool. I think this was really important because that silver die takes so many dice off of the board. You may be taking a higher number than you initially would on an early turn because you want to get all of those, lower numbers marked off in the silver section. Adding in that ability to take a die from the die tray and move it back into the die pool really balances this out. Mm-hmm. You're going to go until the number of rounds, which is specified by player count. In a 2-player game, I believe it's 6. In a 4-player game, it's 4. In a 3-player game, it's 5. You can figure that out. And then at the end of it, you are going to add up all your scores from the different sections, and whoever has the highest score is the winner.
And the cleverest. So clever.
Twice as clever, even.
Danielle?
I like this game. This is not surprising. I liked Ganshon Clever. This is like Ganshon Clever, but with different objectives that you're trying to meet. If you've played Ganshon Clever a whole ton of times and you're like, okay, I know what I need to do and where my numbers need to lie in order to get a really good score on this, this is going to refresh that. It's going to give you new objectives. You need to work out a different way to get the right bonuses at the right time. I think the new changes in the die tracks that they've made are all viable options. None of them are like, oh, this is stupid and I can't ever meet these objectives. I think it's really interesting. The increases in difficulty in marking off some of the squares that they've added, especially in the yellow section where you have to mark a square twice, are counteracted by the fact that you only need to mark each square in a row or column once to get the bonus for that. In Ganshon Clever and also in Doppelt So Clever, you are going to get bonuses when you mark certain columns or rows or specific spaces. In the yellow section in Doppelt So Clever, you will get the bonus when you mark each square in a row or column once. Now, you won't score that at the end of the game, but you will get the bonus, which is really important in either of these games. You need to be able to chain your bonuses together, otherwise you're never going to mark enough squares to get a really good score.
I know I've never been super hot on Ganshon Clever to begin with, but
You've been a bummer about it, man.
I want to make it clear that I don't hate Ganshon Clever. I think it's a good game. It has some really great ideas in it, but I wanted more out of it, and Doppelt So Clever gives me that. It feels less, quote-unquote, solvable to me. Maybe it's just that, we're so new to Doppelt So Clever right now that we haven't figured out the quote-unquote best strategies to fill out your board, but I feel like there are so many different things that you need to be concerned about in this, and so many different ways that you can spend your dice, that it's a much more rewarding experience. I like Doppelt So Clever way more than Ganshon Clever. I think it's a cooler design, it's got cooler interaction, the dice interact with each other in more exciting ways. I love the the silver die using multiple dice. That is the most exciting decision to me, is when I get like a 4 and 3 of the other colors below it on the first roll of the particular round, because that means that I'm going to get 4 things marked off in gray and I still have 2 other dice, so that means I'm going to have more things to do that particular round. I love those kinds of things that I kind of got a little bit in Ganshon Clever, but the new and exciting options that are available in this one are really cool to me.
Yeah, I feel less difference between the two. They are obviously different, but I feel less of a value difference in it. You think this is way better than Ganshon Clever was. I think they're both good. They're just different. But that's just a matter of opinion, I would assume. Doppelt So Clever is doing the things that you wanted. It's ticking the right sections of your brain. They both work for me. One thing I will say is this is definitely available as an app. If you're wondering if you're going to like it, download the app, play it. It's solo only, but it is essentially the whole game.
Yeah.
You're going to get the whole game in there, so check it out there.
Yeah, it's exactly like the Ganshon app. It's the same kind of thing, and it still has the same weird, annoying thing about the woohoos.
No, but they fixed it, though. When you turn the sound off, the sound stays off. Ooh. You don't have to turn it off every time you open the app.
Such a feature.
Look, it's a good feature, especially since the Ganshon Clever app would play the sound even when your phone was on silent. Not real great.
So, question I have for you then. Both of these games are coming out from Stronghold Games here in the US in the next few months. Ganshon Clever will be out, I think, in March, with Doppelt So Clever following shortly thereafter in May, I believe.
Dang.
Assuming both of them are out, say it's June, and you want to buy one of these games, which one would you buy?
Which one would I buy?
Which one specifically would you buy of those two?
I mean, I would buy Doppelt So Clever because I think they're the same and you won't play Ganshon Clever.
Okay. I will definitely play Doppelt So Clever, D.
I think the answer is try them both on the app and decide which one you like better. If you would like a physical copy of one of them, decide that way. I don't think that there is one that is a better game. I think they are just different.
Okay.
So whichever one hits the right part of your brain, that's the one you get. They're both good games.
So, second question. Knowing that both of these will be out in April or May, June or so, would you buy one of them? Or would you just stick to playing on the app?
I probably will not for two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, I just really like playing on the app. This is the kind of roll and write that I think plays just fine with technically two players. The app is simulating a two-player game. Mm-hmm. There is a little bit of interaction that you gain when you're playing in a four-player game, and I think that's interesting. But this is the kind of game that I like to play just to kill some time if I'm riding somewhere, if I'm waiting for a bus or a cab or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this is a time filler game for me. Mm-hmm. I'm also really hesitant to buy them because I'm like, are they just going to come out with one box that has both of these in like 6 months? Because I feel like that's what I would do. I would just be like, it's the clever, I was about to say duology, but that's not a word, duo, and put them both in the same box.
Huh. That's not a terrible idea. And of course, you could always just take the score sheets from one to the other. I don't think there's... Well, I guess the silver die is different. I don't know. You can figure that stuff out. I feel like the reason to have the physical edition of either of these is if you enjoy playing it with 3 or 4 players. If you want to have more options to get stuff of other people's stuff. It does also change the number of rounds. But frankly, you're right. Like, I enjoy this the most when I can bang it out in 5 to 6 minutes on the app. It's fun that way. But regardless, these are both going to be available physically soon, and you can get a taste for them now.
There are people who just don't like playing board game apps. That's fine. And if so, pick up one of these games. It's a fun time. Yeah. I think it's a good little roll and write.
Yeah, well, whichever way you end up playing it, I'm sure it will make you feel pretty smart. Sorry, I had to. Yeah, Doppelt So Clever, there it is. Danielle, time to go on to the bird place.
Hey Jake, have you ever wondered what would happen if the moon, which was actually an ancient dragon god that was all riled up because warriors were trying to get rid of the gods, crashed into the Pacific Ocean and opened a rift that put humans in a post-apocalyptic state and mutated all the animals to have crazy abilities?
I can't say I've had exactly that thought.
Well, in Tsukiyumi, you and your friends will take the role of soldiers and giant boars, a robot army, mutated roaches, and the descendants of ancient dragon slayers, each using your own abilities to bid for opportunities to accomplish your, moon goals.
And when can I accomplish these moon goals?
Grey Fox Games is bringing Tsukiyumi to Kickstarter in mid-March 2019, so keep your eye out lest you anger the dragon moon god further.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. All right, let's fly on into our 6-pack review for this episode. It is...
That's 2.
Dang it. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to fail miserably, but I'm going to try my best not to use any more bird puns through this review of Wingspan. Okay?
Sure.
I'm going to try.
So we are talking about Wingspan, which is a 2019 release from Stonemaier Games. It plays 1 to 5 players in 40 to 70 minutes. It's designed by Elizabeth Hargrave. The artists are Ana Maria Martinez Jaramillo, Natalia Rojas, and Beth Sobel. This is a game of tableau building, hand and resource management, and also...
Okay, fair. That's not a pun. That's just a bird sound. All right, let me walk you through a game of Wingspan.
Why don't you fly us through instead?
Now, that's not fair. That's not fair. And we've already used that pun once. We flew into the review zone.
Fair enough.
All right, so a game of Wingspan is going to take place over 4 rounds. You have a set of action cubes. You'll start with 8 in the beginning of the game, which will become a different number later on, but I'll explain that when we get there. And you're going to, on your turn, use one of your action cubes to take one of the 4 actions available to you on your giant bird board. Thematically, you are putting birds into an aviary. It's an open aviary. They can leave whenever they want, but they've chosen to come into your aviary for this particular game.
Really?
That's particularly in the theming. It's not a closed aviary.
I thought I was making a bird army.
I mean, isn't any kind of bird collection a bird army? Bird farm. So your aviary board is split up into 4 rows. The very top row is the one that will be assigned the action of play a bird. And you aren't actually playing any birds in that particular row, but it's where you'll place your cube to play a bird in one of the 3 other rows. The next 3 rows, you have the top one, which is the foresty area of your particular aviary, is the one where you will play a cube to get food from the bird feeder. You have a nice standing birdhouse-shaped bird feeder that you roll dice into. It's a really cool piece of equipment that you probably have already seen on the internet 3,000 times, but you roll the dice into this dice tower,
Yeah,
and the dice come out
it's a dice
of that.
tower.
Yeah, but you choose some dice out of that based on the number of birds you have in your aviary in the forest row. The middle row is for laying eggs. When you play a cube in that row, you will lay eggs onto several of your birds.
That's not how eggs work.
That's not how eggs work, but it is how eggs work in this game. Each bird has a capacity for eggs we'll talk about later. And then the bottom row, your wetlands, is where you will play an action cube to draw additional bird cards. There's nothing funny about that. You just get more cards. But it is, at this point, worth mentioning that there are 170 unique bird cards in this game. Every single one of the cards has a different particular bird and different art, and a bunch of different powers. Obviously, some powers replicate on different cards, just so that you don't have infinity combinations of stuff, but you have a lot of different options of different bird powers that these birds have. And these cards are going to have a bunch of different information on them. The birds at the very top will tell you which of the 3 habitats they can be played into. They will have a food cost that are different resources you're going to be collecting from that bird feeder, obviously, throughout the game. Each bird needs a certain kind of food to come into your aviary. What a surprise. There is below that a victory points for having that bird on your tableau. After that, there's a type of nest, which will relate to some round-end scoring goals and also some endgame scoring goals. There's an icon on there that will tell you how many eggs that bird can support. I guess they've got big arms, some of them, and can carry a lot of eggs. That's how that works?
No.
And then below the full color illustrations of the birds, you have generally an action power. Most of them are a brown stripe, and these powers will activate in the row that you take an action. We'll talk about the way that works, but you're building an engine, basically, of birds, a bird engine in your bird army from your bird farm. I don't know. And then some of them don't have a color behind them, and those are just when you play the card, you get that power. And there's also some that are pink that you are able to get a bonus on other players' turns, but only once between your turns. So obviously in a 4-player game or a 5-player game, you're going to have more chances for that power to come up, but it can still only come up a maximum of 1 time between your turns. So when you play an action cube in one of the 3 rows, other than the play a bird row that I'll talk about in a second, you're going to place it in the leftmost open space. As you add more birds to each row, they're going to fill in from the left to the right, and as you add more birds, the action you take becomes more powerful. For example, in the eggs row, you might start off with just getting 2 eggs if the row is completely empty, but at the end you're going to get more eggs and also the opportunity to discard a resource to gain additional eggs onto your birds. Same thing with drawing cards and also gaining food from the bird feeder. I will say about gaining food, so like I said, you've got these 5 dice you roll into the dice tower, and when you take that action, you're going to take the dice one by one out of the bird dice tray, the bird tray. The dice birds?
Bird
seed.
feeder.
Yeah, you're going to take one of the dice, and if at any point before you go to take a die from the bird feeder, all of them are the same face, you may choose to roll all of the dice before you go for it. So it might actually be a benefit to take something you don't super need just to re-roll all the dice and hopefully get what you want on that second draw. The top row of playing a bird card is the one that doesn't power up with actions, but it does get increasingly more expensive as you add more birds to each row. If I want to play a bird in the 3rd space of my forestry, for example, I will have to discard eggs off of other birds to put that bird into that row. And as you go up, you'll start with a 0 for the first row, and then 1 for the next 2 columns, and then 2 and then 2 for the last 2 columns, up to a maximum of 5 birds per row. So you're going to need to work all of your actions together and get a really good flow going so that you're getting birds in and getting eggs in and getting cards and food when you need them to play more birds. And then obviously you're building a cool engine of bird powers as you are getting more and more in each of the rows. So that's your typical round, and at the end of each round, you're going to evaluate one of a bunch of different kind of end-round scoring goals. Generally, like, do you have these kinds of birds, or birds in this habitat, or eggs in these places, or do you have this kind of nest floating around, stuff like that. And this is where the interesting action cube mechanic comes in, is that you will actually take one of your action cubes each round to mark that score track. So the second round of the game, you're only going to have 7 actions, and then 6, and then 5 in the final round as you work your way through the game. So you will have fewer actions, but hopefully you've built an engine that will amass you more powers faster as time goes on. You are also going to have some kind of secret objective cards, kind of in a Castles of Mad King Ludwig style. You'll draw some at the beginning of the game, choose one for yourself, and you have the option to gain more of them as the game goes on. But these are very similar to the round end goals, but also will require you to have birds of certain kinds, or birds with certain names or words in them, or just birds that are in certain habitats, so on and so forth. And really, you're going to go through the game, and at the end of the game, you're going to gain additional points for your bird cards, for every egg that is on your tableau, for every card that is tucked underneath a bird on your tableau, for all of your end game goals, your round end goals, and then just pat yourself on the back if you have the best bird army in Wingspan, a competitive bird army construction game for birding. birdages.
This tagline not endorsed by Stonemaier
Not at all.
Games.
So let's start off talking about the production art and components of this game. I feel like this is where we generally start one of our six-pack reviews. And I would say, with one asterisk, the production on this game is exceptional.
It's a big asterisk, though.
Yeah, so we'll start off with like the actual components. There's a really great game trays insert that holds all your cards. It has a nice tray that you use for displaying the birds available each round of the game to draw, and you can actually just pass that around. It's kind of a nice little feature there.
In a 5-player game, being able to pass the available face-up birds is
Mm-hmm.
actually really useful because some of the powers have a lot of words that you can't necessarily read from across a table. It's really important to know what those powers are before you take them.
The dice are nice. They're wooden dice. They're nice and big. The dice tower fits them just fine. And the dice tower itself is such an extravagant component. You know, the fact that there is a dice tray at all is completely unnecessary, but looks cool and adds to kind of the thematic feel of the game as a whole. The art, I think, is phenomenal. I love the bird art on this particular game.
Definitely.
And the board art is also great. Really just art in general, very good.
Yeah, the fact that there is a unique piece of art for each of the individual birds and that they're not just random little head shots of the bird. Like, it's a full drawing, and a lot of them are in the middle of something. Some of them are eating, some of them are in flight, some of them are just hanging out. It is really well done art, and the iconography, I will also say, is also well done.
Yeah.
It's easy to tell what you need for each type of bird, what food you need, where it can go. It's easy to see how many points you're going to get, what type of nest it is, and how many eggs that they can take. There's a good bit of information, in addition to, like, superfluous information, which is just flavor text that is all displayed on the card very nicely. You've got the name of the bird in English, you've got the name of the bird in Latin, the taxonomy name, you've got where on the planet this type of bird can live, and a little flavor text fact about each bird as well. And the cards don't feel cluttered. Now, there is some small text on there, but the stuff that is really small is the flavor text and the Latin name, stuff you don't actually need for the game.
Yeah, it's really well designed, and just the production overall is pretty stellar. I will say, in the first and second printings of the game, there are some typos. There is one or two specifically game-altering typos. There is one in one of the bonus cards that instead of requiring 2 or 3 birds, you have to have 4 or 5 birds to score points for that.
There's also a bird which is just the wrong number of points on its bird. There are more than a handful of typos on the card.
Yeah, and some of those are pretty noticeable. There's stuff where they put 3 E's in the word between, or I guess 4 E's, technically.
Which is something I didn't even notice because my brain knows what the word between looks like. But still, I mean, if you're paying a good amount of money and you have this game and you want it to look like the word between can be spelled properly.
I will say Jamie Stegmaier is doing a great job of correcting this in advance. He is going to have a free replacement card pack available to anybody with the first or second edition of the game.
Oh, good to know.
Available either from him at conventions or from their online web store, or also from Meeple Source that does a lot of their, online store distribution of upgraded components and stuff like that. It'll be a free upgrade pack, and it's only going to matter for the first and second printings of this game, because the third printing, the one that's actually going to be in stores in April, has all of these things fixed, which is nice.
Okay, that being said, if you did back it on... This was available for their Champions program, correct?
And
if
also
you,
just pre-orders in general.
Yeah. If you backed it early, you are going to have to mark up your cards, and I know for some people that's a deal.
Yeah. It wasn't a super big deal to me. I fixed the 2 cards, and the other ones are, like, the typos and stuff are small enough that, like I said, I don't even notice the word between so much. Yeah, it's annoying, and I'm surprised, but I'm also glad that Jamie is doing such a good job at resolving this thing.
There is a comprehensive list, I think it's on BGG, that he created with all of the typos. So if you do pick up this game and you want to make sure that you've got everything marked the way it needs to be marked before you get that replacement pack, just go on BGG and there is a list of everything that will either need correcting or spelling corrections or whatever. So that is available.
The next section I kind of want to go into is rulebook and learning curve. And this is kind of important to me because of the amount of games that we're playing these days. I honestly have a hard time getting bigger games out to teach because it's such a pain in the butt to learn giant new games. Wingspan is not a particularly heavy game.
No.
And to its benefit, the rulebook setup kind of facilitates it even more. There's actually 2 rulebooks in here. You have a standard reference rulebook, and then you have another appendix that lists all of the different bird powers and groups them out very nicely so you can reference and see what other kinds of powers there are. But in that appendix, there is also a 1-page quick start book. And this is actually how I originally learned the game of Wingspan. The quick start actually walks you through setup and how all of the game mechanics are going to work, because once you know the basic mechanics of how you're going to be playing birds and getting the different resources, everything else comes from reading the cards as you get them, which really makes it easy to get new people into this game. Like I said, it's not a super heavy game. It's kind of in a comparable space to like a Gizmos or an engine builder in that kind of space, which I'm sure Gizmos is going to come up a lot because it's the most recent kind of buzz engine builder of this weight that we've talked about on the show, and a lot of people are talking about out there in the board game world, Boardosphere.
I mean, the publisher drew a comparison to Gizmos, so I think it's a fair thing to bring up.
No, it very much is. So I had a pretty easy job teaching this, and we've taught this to a lot of different people, both at Whose Turn or at our game nights or even, game nights at home. And I felt like I did a pretty good job teaching it. Danielle, did you feel pretty easy to get a feel for this game the first time you played it?
Yeah, it's not a difficult game to pick up. I do want to know why the rulebooks are linen finish plasticized pages. It's very weird, and I'm not super fond of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's been true of Stonemaier for a little while. Between Two Castles had the same really highly produced rulebook as well.
Okay, yeah, the last Stonemaier rulebook that I read was the Scythe rulebook, which is just a normal paper book.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a weird tactile sensation to pick up this weird linen finish rulebook.
It's a weirdly luxurious rulebook. So how about the gameplay? Danielle, like we've said a little bit already, this is not a specifically heavy engine builder. It's pretty light. It's easily accessible. Pretty much every game we've played has been about an hour. But like I said, we're going to be drawing a lot of comparisons to Gizmos. So what stood out about this to you versus other engine builders?
Well, I think one of the things that makes it feel a lot like Gizmos is that each turn you are taking a specific action and you will get additional bonuses based on what you have already played under that action. Gizmos does a very similar thing where, if you're taking the reserve action or file, I think it's called, in Gizmos, you may have a bunch of extra powers that happen after you take that action. And Wingspan does a similar thing. If you take the gain food, then you're going to get the gain food, but then you're going to get everything else that you've previously completed into that gain food column. In that way, it is very similar. But there are a couple of things about Wingspan that I like more than Gizmos. In Gizmos, if you are at a maximum resource limit, like there is a limit on how many of your little sphere resources you can take, if you are at a limit, your powers suddenly feel not helpful, because they may allow you to draw extra resources, but you can't because you're already at your limit. In Wingspan, I never felt like I didn't have the capacity to be able to use all of my birds. Now, I may not always be able to use all of my bird powers. Some of them may require me to tuck cards underneath, and I don't want to spend those cards because I want to put them into my habitats. Or they may require me to discard a type of food, and I haven't prioritized getting that type of food. But I always feel like that's a choice I made. I'm not taking a power because I absolutely need to take that action, but I didn't have the opportunity to be able to get the most of it. That being said, when you do pass up on those powers, it does feel like a little bit of a bummer.
I will say one thing that really stands out about Wingspan to me versus a game like Gizmos is that in Gizmos, all of the bonus powers that you get from your engine building benefit the engine itself. In Wingspan, there are birds that you will get that exist kind of on their own. There are the birds that, if you activate this bird, you're going to roll all the dice not in the bird feeder, and then you can cash some particular type of food to that card to get game end points. Or there's other ones that allow you to tuck cards underneath them and draw more cards. There's other ones that interact in other interesting ways. And that's the thing that I really appreciate about the card design and the engine building in Wingspan is that it doesn't exist just to build its engine. As you were building and developing your engine, you were actually using that engine to get points and do other fun things, rather than just get another cube or get another resource or, get another card. There's other ways that you're using that engine while doing those things.
I agree. But at the same time, because the interactions between the cards that you put on your board can be so important, I feel like there can be a little bit of swinginess if one player just happens to flip up on the display cards a couple of cards that work very well together. Say you went before me and you took 2 cards. Or even if you took 1 card and I flipped one up, and I, on my turn, get to draw some cards. You have a choice of taking one of the face-up cards or drawing blindly off the deck. So maybe I take one of a blind card first, and I get something that works really, really well with something that's face-up, and I get to draw a second card. I take that second card. I've now got a really great combination that works really well together that I just got because I lucked into that combination. Mm-hmm. Now, other players can draw additional cards. They can try to get their own good combination, and there are enough different powers that if you draw cards, you should be able to get something that works well together and find a way to work with what you have to facilitate actually getting a decent amount of points. But it does feel a little bit swingy if one person just happens to luck into a really strong combination and the other players don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, and that was the biggest frustration that I had with playing the game is, just like you said, sometimes I get really lucky and get a few good early game cards, and sometimes I don't see cards that work well with my cards, and sometimes I don't see cards that work with the end round goals. And even at a 4 or 5 player game where we were churning that deck as much as possible, we never got anywhere close to finishing out the deck of cards. I think maybe we got within like 10 or 15 cards once, and that was like Daniel was somehow... Daniel had a point where he got like 15 to 20 cards in his hand by the end of the game just because he had so many draw powers.
Well, yeah, he had a very good combination of cards that allowed him to cash from the deck, and he did it by taking the draw cards action. Mm-hmm. So he was drawing 3 cards and cashing 4 cards from the deck every round.
Daniel also won that game.
By a lot.
Yeah, so it is fun, and it plays in a quick enough time that kind of swinginess, I guess I can excuse it a bit. I'm hoping that as more bird decks come out for this, and yes, there is way expansion planned in the future for this.
Really?
Yep. That hopefully each of those expansion decks will either be a full swap out or allow you to, select perfect cards to go in to balance that out. I guess this is kind of going way far ahead in the review here, but yeah, most of the birds in this particular deck are North America available? Birds that are in the North America. There we go. And they're going to do expansion packs with birds from different continents, basically, which is a really cool way to do expansions.
So can you swap between the 2 decks?
Was that a bird joke?
No, it was a typo
I see.
joke.
That was a typo. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that on the first glance. That wasn't a pun. That was just me not getting it. But yeah, I guess you can switch between all the different bird decks and hopefully get a different experience. And that's good because I feel like the framework in this is a solid enough game that if you swap out the birds in there and get yourself some new and exciting powers, you'll have a fresh play of it in the future.
But should you need to buy a new deck of birds to keep the freshness in this game?
No, probably not. And frankly, you can probably play with the base set enough for it to be fresh, as long as you get a good feel for what can come up, what will come up, and how to work around it if you don't get your preferred strategy.
Fair enough.
Speaking of what will and won't come up, I want to talk about the end round and end game goals. So like I said, you draft those cards at the very... or not draft. You select those cards at the very beginning that are your end round goal, and maybe I'll have one that's number of birds in your wetlands area. If you have 3 to 4, you get so many points, and if you have all 5, you get 7 points. There's also the ones at the end of each round where it's, eggs in this particular kind of habitat or this nest or stuff like that. How did you feel about those? Do you feel like you were adequately able to plan for them and build up to them as the game was going on?
I felt like I was able to plan for whether I was going to be able to plan for them.
Okay.
Which sounds stupid, but it was actually really useful. Because you know all of the end round goals at the beginning of the game, and you know at least one of your end game goals, you can draw additional end game cards throughout the game if you play specific birds. But because I knew all of the things that I was going to be able to score for at the beginning of the game, I was able to sort of be selective about which birds I was taking into my hand to be able to play out later, or what type of food I was taking, because I knew that I was going to need birds that liked a specific type of food. There is a logical following on what types of food birds eat. Mm-hmm. Hawks eat mice as opposed to, berries, because that's what hawks eat. So if I had a end goal that said I needed big birds, so birds above a certain wingspan, because wingspan is also listed on the cards. I'm not sure we mentioned that, but it is the name of the game.
Oh yeah, that is the other one.
I would know that I need, maybe mice and fish, because the bigger birds are more likely to eat that than they are to eat wheat and berries, generally. And I could plan for that. if I knew that the first round we are going to score birds with a bowl-shaped nest, which is one of the type of nests that is available, and my initial hand had 5 birds that had no bowl-shaped nests in it, I might just plan for the second, third, and fourth rounds.
Yeah.
Because you get more on one of the sides of the point scoring track, because there are 2 different sides that you can play with for end round goals. You can just take however many you have and you'll get that many points. Or there is whoever has the most will get this many points. Whoever has the second most will get fewer points. And if you don't participate at all, you get no points.
No points.
I believe that is the better side to play with.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. So assuming we're talking about that side, you get more points for having the most in later rounds. You have more time to plan for it, but you also get more reward for it. So in the first round, you get 4 points for having the most of something. If I know I'm not going to be able to do that, like I have nothing that puts me towards that goal, I can start working on round 2 or round 3 or round 4, where if I can get that put together, I'm going to get more points anyway. So I like the fact that you can always plan for what you're going to need. And the only time that that's not going to be the case is if you draw additional endgame bonus cards, at which point it's kind of like an extra Christmas present that you leave in the closet and you find in April, and you're like, oh, cool.
Here's points I can get.
Yeah, here's points that I sort of stumbled into, and I can continue working towards those. But the thing that I picked at the beginning of the game, the even footing that we started off with, I was able to plan for.
Yeah, I felt the same way about the end round goals. When we were playing on the side that was just however many you have is the points you score, I didn't try for them at all because they're 0 to max 5 points, which I probably could spend my points better elsewhere getting those points. But on that reverse side where you're competing for the most of whatever that particular goal is, I definitely spent my time focusing on the round 3 and 4 goals because they're worth more points. And I do really like that, and that made me enjoy that particular aspect a lot more. I'm glad that we eventually started playing on that side. We played the points you get side the first time, the non-confrontational side, our first game or two, and it was meh. But the confrontational, quote-unquote, side was much more exciting and much more interesting to plan for, and it made me pay attention to other people's aviaries a lot more. I appreciated that a lot, and that's the only time that I really cared much about those end-round goals, is the round 3 and 4 ones. So I guess last thing to talk about is scaling. Did you feel this game was much different between 2 and 5 players?
Not particularly. The one thing that was better with more players was those pink powers that were on some of the birds, where you can do something once between your turns. In a 2-player game, it was not particularly helpful to have those powers, because A, there's only one other player, and B, that one other player knows the thing you want them to do, so unless they absolutely need to do that thing, they're not going to do it. In a 4-player game, or a 4 or a 5-player game even, you are more likely to have somebody do the thing that you needed, so playing that card out becomes more of a boon to your entire tableau, and I think that that sort of balances out those cards a little bit better. Other than that, if you're not playing a whole ton of pink power cards, I think the game plays almost identically with 2 and 5 players.
Yeah.
The only difference being those end-of-round bonuses are going to be distributed slightly differently. If you don't participate in an end round goal, you will always get no points. So even if you are in a 2-player game and you don't do the goal at all, you're still going to get no points, even though there are 4 spaces on that board. But if you participate at all in a 2-player game, you're going to get some points, so I think that's a little different. But there's enough of a space between first and second in that track in all of the rounds that I don't think it takes away from that confrontation at all.
I think that the other thing I enjoyed about higher player counts was more turnover in the bird feeder. Obviously, with 4 or 5 players, you're going to have more people taking food, which means you're going to be turning that over a lot faster. At 2 players, it can get a little stagnant, but at the same time, you're more aware of what the other player is going to be needing, so you're more aware of what kind of stuff you probably want to take out of there. That's really the only other thing, other than obviously you're going to have more downtime in a 5-player game just because everybody's got their own turn. There's not a lot of interactivity in Wingspan, which is fine for some groups. I mean, you're obviously going to interact in terms of what you talked about with the pink powers, and you're going to interact in the bird feeder with the food that's up there. But other than kind of passive interactivity, it's not like you're going to be raiding somebody else's aviary and stealing their birds. So it is a very easy and comfortable playing game. And I felt that that was true at pretty much every player count. Like, I didn't feel particularly cutthroat at 2.
No.
So, Danielle, you want to wrap it up with some final thoughts?
Sure. I think this is a good game, which is helped along significantly by the theme it has. It has a really charming theme. You have all these beautiful birds that are laid out in front of you, and there are definitely some birds in this game that I had never even heard of. I had not heard of a roseate spoonbill. It is a stupid-looking bird. It's like a big flamingo with a really long beak that's got a big circle on the end of it, which is not how beaks should be. But I've now seen that bird a number of times because I had apparently a knack for drawing it. Mm-hmm. But having this tableau of all these bird powers in front of me and all these little pastel eggs that look exactly like the little Easter chocolates that you get that have like a hard candy shell and they're chocolate eggs, don't eat the eggs. Mm-hmm. It's super charming. It is a good game. I wouldn't necessarily bring this game to the table a ton after having reviewed it if it didn't have a charming theme. That being said, it does, and I do get enjoyment from that. I like looking at the fun pictures of birds. I like learning about the birds. I like having weird bird puns with my friends because we're freaking nerds. I really like the theme of this game, and it takes what is... It's a little bit above average game. It is a good game.
Yeah.
And it makes it something that I'm willing to pull off the shelf and put out on the table because I feel joy when I put it on the table. I feel like Netflix has brought the Marie Kondo and her sparking joy into all of our lives at this point. And putting Wingspan on the table sparks joy, even if playing Wingspan would not necessarily spark as much joy if it were any other theme.
I agree completely. Wingspan is a good game that is elevated by great theming and great production. It's fantastic on the table. It draws people in. It's got a really attention-grabbing look to it. And the gameplay is solid, if not too terribly heavy or complex. The gameplay in this comes from the cards and whether or not you get really cool combinations of stuff that works together. When it does, it feels good, and you get some really smart chains of different actions on your different stuff. If it doesn't come up for you, it can be a little bit of a frustrating thing to get that engine going, and it might take till the second round to really get something that you're having fun with. I think it's easy to learn and easy to teach, and a group that plays some games but hasn't got super deep into gaming could easily pick this up off the shelf, read that quick start rulebook, and get into it, and have a really good hour to hour and a half playing a game of Wingspan. When we were at this Whose Turn Is It Anyway convention last weekend, it was continually out on the table, and there were probably 10, 15 copies of Wingspan floating around at the convention, and at any given time you would probably see 5 or 6 or 10 games of it going on. It is a exciting new theme in a space we don't usually see, elevated by its production, and a solid foundation of gameplay. While it might not be the most exciting engine builder I've ever played, I definitely understand the allure, and I can see why people are flocking to it.
Boo! Boo!
Gotta put one in there. It's the Kaizo block at the end of the review.
Ouch.
All right, moving on to the on-tap.
So much I would like to. What?
For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. So, in case you briefly forgot what we are talking about, our on-tap game today is Wingspan, the 2019 release from Stonemaier Games that plays 1 to 5 players in 40 to 70 minutes, designed by Elizabeth Hargrave with art by Ana Maria Martinez Amarillo, Natalia Rojas, and Beth Sobel. The tableau-building hand and resource management game about birds. Danielle, hit us with some bird beers.
Okay, first from Stigbergets Brewery in Göteborg, Sweden, we have Bird in Hand.
Bird.
It is an Imperial IPA. It is 8% APV, 65 IBU, and it is worth 2 bird in bush.
Dang, you got to it before me.
It has citrusy and grassy flavors with some notes of melon and peaches, a little bit of booze in there because it is a double IPA, and it has some moderate bitterness.
It looks like this one's available in a 16-ounce can?
Yep, it is certainly.
Cool. Next up, we have a local beer for us, Birdsong Brewing Company's Lazy Bird Brown Ale. They're obviously here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is an American brown ale, 6.5% ABV, 45 IBU. It's a roasty and lemony aroma, brewed with Cascade hops and roasted barley. I like Lazy Bird. That's a good brown ale. Brown ales don't get a lot of respect.
Lazy Bird is definitely my go-to Birdsong beer.
Mm-hmm.
They have some really nice, different flavored stuff. Like they have a T.I.M.E. wit beer that is good. They have a jalapeno pale, which has no heat but jalapeno flavor. But like if I'm going to pick up something from Birdsong, it's usually going to be a Lazy Bird Brown.
Yeah.
From Het Utile in Haarlem, Noord-Holland, Netherlands, we have Bird of Prey IPA. This is an international IPA. which is 5.8% ABV and 50 IBU. It's brewed with Citra, Chinook, and Mosaic hops. And, I mean, you've got some good birds of prey in Wingspan. There is definitely an action category that is predatory actions that allows you to get a good bit of points. So I wanted to make sure we got a predatory bird on our list.
Okay.
And this is available in 330 milliliter bottles.
Cool. Next up, from Lamplighter Brewing Company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, we have Birds of a Feather. It's a New England IPA, 6.8% ABV. So as a New England IPA, this is obviously going to have a ton of citrus and passion fruit notes, creamy mouthfeel, and this is a double dry hopped with a whole crap ton of hops, undoubtedly.
I've liked everything I've had from Lamplighter, so I am anxious to try this if we get a chance.
I am a really big fan of the New England IPA style. You know, some people call it too juicy and not bitter enough, but I feel like it is a style that is very good for people to get into IPAs and understand that. If, like, 10 years ago you didn't like IPAs, or 5 years ago you didn't like IPAs because they were all too piney, the New England IPA style is a very good way to get into it and enjoy that and get yourself accustomed to that increased hop profile.
Do people really complain about that?
Yes.
People are terrible.
Have you met the internet?
I have.
Okay.
Finally, from Trillium Brewing Company in Canton, Massachusetts, we have sort of a representative beer. This is Pipsqueak Penguin, which is a representative of their Small Bird series. It is the currently available representative of their Small Bird series. It's It's an American Pale Ale, and it's 4.9% ABV. That's sort of noteworthy because the Small Bird series is all low ABV offerings that they have. They have 8 entries in it so far, and they are available at different times of the year. They are as follows: Tiny Chicken,
Yes.
Little Rooster, Skimpy Sparrow,
Oh.
Pocket Pigeon,
Aw.
Stumpy Duck, Itty Bitty Goose, Puny Partridge, and of course Pipsqueak Penguin.
That's fabulous.
So if you are in the Massachusetts area, you can check out Lamplighter, but you can also check out the Small Bird series from Trillium. And there are definitely some incentives for getting small birds, whether they are to fulfill your endgame objective in Wingspan, I've had that card, or because you can eat birds that are smaller than a certain wingspan because you have a bird of prey. So I really wanted to get the Small Bird series in here. And there's definitely a penguin in Wingspan, so he fits.
There you go. All right, well, if you would like more information on any and all of those beers, you can come to our show notes section on the website draftmechanic.net. You just click show notes and you will get there. Danielle will put the links into the website and you will be able to click the links to get information.
The lists are also available on my Untapped if you use the Untapped app for logging your beers or for looking up beers or whatever. All of these lists are available if you go to my profile. That's Laughs Too Easily, and you should be able to click through and get all of the lists, not only for this one, but for all of the previous Untaps going back to probably like episode 20 or something like that.
I guess it's been a while since we mentioned Untapped, but if you are an Untapped user, you're totally free to friend us. I am INDJK. INDJK, just those 5 letters, and you are Laughs Too Easily. It's a good way to, see what other people are drinking throughout the board gaming and beer-in world. So, yeah. All right, Danielle, you mind if I take the beer segment for an episode?
I will be more than happy to hand it off to you.
Okay, so I want to talk about something that is kind of a little personal to me, but also important for everybody to know about. So back in October, I was diagnosed type 2 diabetic, and this has been a real big difference in my life. Obviously, learning to deal with this condition that doesn't allow me to use blood glucose effectively, basically. And one of the things that is biggest impacted here is how I'm drinking beer and how I'm drinking alcohol. Obviously, we talk about craft beer a lot, and craft beer is generally can be carb heavy. It can also obviously have a lot of alcohol that can complicate that kind of stuff. So I've been doing a lot of research into low carb drinking options recently. For the most part, my goal is to reduce my carb intake, and it's been going really well. I've, cut back a lot on beer, and I've changed up my eating and drinking habits and stuff like that. But to get a kind of a feel for it, so your typical 12-ounce beer generally weighs in at 10 to 15 carbohydrates per 12-ounce serving. So a few of note, like your Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, 12 carbs. The Founders All Day IPA is about 12. The Boulevard Unfiltered Wheat's 13.6. New Belgium Fat Tire is 17.4. And then you get up to the heavier IPAs like Ballast Point Sculpin is at 20 carbs. And Dogfish Head's 60-minute IPA, which is really just like the standardest of IPAs that I enjoy in life, is 23 carbs. So when I'm trying to keep my particular meals down 60 or below, and also really trying to limit my snacks to around 15 carbs, that means that one IPA could really put me over a limit or really get me more carbs than I want in a particular serving. So obviously, I've changed up a lot about that, and one of the biggest things that you can always look at is big beer has all these light beers. So for comparison, I thought I would mention Michelob Ultra is 2.6 carbs in a 12-ounce bottle, Bud Select is 3.1 carbs, and Miller Lite is 3.2 carbs. But that stuff is not good beer. I don't want to drink those beers. So I've kind of been in the position where I'm trying to decide how I'm going to continue having a drink here and there. Thankfully, there's a lot of breweries out there in the world that are looking for new options and new ways to do things. One of the biggest things that I've seen over the last few years is the increase of craft spiked seltzer. You'll see White Claw is one of the really common ones you'll see at stores, but one of our local breweries here, Noda Brewing, started a new line called Bruzzo, which is a craft seltzer, and they have it available in 4 different flavors. Oh, we're really big fans of the lemon macroot lime, and then there's I think a strawberry lemon that was really good.
I think it's raspberry lemon.
Raspberry lemon, yeah. But this is a 12-ounce serving that they're claiming to be 3 to 4 carbs per serving, which is fantastic because then I get to continue supporting one of my very favorite breweries, and I can have these in between other, lower carb beers or even an IPA here and there. And if I'm just smart about the drinking, I'm able to control that intake. Now, I will say a lot of times when you're looking at beer and stuff like that, it's hard to find information on carbs because it's not really subjected to the same level of labeling that most food is.
If I can step in here,
Yeah.
it's because beer is not considered a food. It's under alcohol, tobacco, and firearms as opposed to the FDA. So there are different labeling requirements that they have to abide by. Whereas, any kind of soda or food considered beverage is going to have to put your nutrition facts on it. Because beer is under the alcohol listing, they don't have to give you as much information. And a lot of smaller breweries just don't have this information because doing this testing requires specific equipment that they may not have if they're smaller breweries, or because from batch to batch you're going to get a little bit of variance in the amount of carbs that are in a beer because it is a natural product and the yeast eat a different amount of the carbohydrates every time. You are going to get a different exact carb value between this batch of, say, 60-minute IPA and the next batch of 60-minute IPA. It shouldn't be a ton of it, but yeast is a living organism, and there is going to be some variance. And if you publish a value, you're then sort of opening yourself up to being held to that value.
Cool. Well, thank you for bringing that extra bit of information in.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, it is your beer. It is your beer segment in general. You are just lending it to me for a little bit. So thankfully, I've got Bruzzo and other kind of spiked craft seltzers available to me, and I can still have beer from time to time. But unsurprisingly, I still thirst for a really good IPA here and there. Obviously, I want to have a nice, New England-style IPA, something super juicy, something that's got a lot of flavor to it. And like Dogfish Head 60-Minute is such a fantastic beer. Like stuff like that, knowing that it's 23 carbs for me to have one of those when it's still one of my favorite classic go-to IPAs kind of got me a little frustrated. Thankfully, head brewer, owner, and founder of Dogfish Head, Sam Calagione, had a similar thought. And I read an article in which he says this quote, "Well, I thought, I'm not going to slow down my drinking, so I better start innovating." And the geniuses at Dogfish Head Craft Brewing have come up with a new idea. They have an IPA on the way that will be available in April or May of this year, called Slightly Mighty IPA, which they claim at 95 calories and 3.6 grams of carbs in a 12-ounce serving. This uses monk fruit extract for sweetness, which is apparently 300 times the sweetness of raw sugar, but does not add calories or carbohydrates to the beer. Even with that, they had to do some really molecular science magic to balance that sweetness out, and this beer is still going to have a nice dry finish and a big fragrant hop presence with notes of mango and pineapple. This is something that I'm super excited about, and I'm so glad that breweries are experimenting with this and trying to come up with new solutions for people to enjoy a good craft beer without having to break the quote-unquote carb bank like I would have to. So hats off to Dogfish Head. This is something I'm super excited about. I cannot wait to taste this and hopefully add it into my routine so I can continue to have a really good craft beer here and there.
And there are lots of people who are watching their carbs for any number of reasons, not only just for medical reasons, but some people are just on a low-carb diet or whatever. This would be a great option for them as well.
Yeah.
I do want to say at the end of this, thank you for doing this somewhat personal beer segment. You are also working with your doctor on this, so please don't send us a bunch of emails saying this is a bad idea. Jake is taking his health very seriously, and I'm proud of him for that. The other thing that is important to really stress is if you have any kind of carb or condition that you are watching carbs, the way that alcohol interacts with carbs is a little bit more complicated than we got into here. So
Yes.
if you are watching your carbs, don't just take this at face value. Make sure that you also consult with your doctor or a nurse or physician or whatever, because the alcohol may affect differently the way your body works with the carbs, even in different levels of alcohol.
Yeah, I do want to back that up, everything you said there. I'm working with my doctors. I've been going to diabetes classes, and I've been reading up a lot more on it. I just wanted to give a surface-level overview on some carb stuff so you out there can become a little more knowledgeable. And frankly, go get checked for this, because it is important to know about your health, especially if you are in the craft beer world, because we drink a lot of beer sometimes. And I'm glad that I learned about this now so I can make changes in my diet and in my drinking habits that will help me stay healthy for a long time.
So you're not getting rid of us yet.
Nope, not at all. Speaking of, it's time to go over to the end of the show,
Yeah, it's not the final round.
but it's the last part, so yeah, asterisk. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. So at the end of the episode today, I kind of wanted to talk about our experiences at the Whose Turn Is It Anyway gaming convention up in Durham.
We wanted to leave this to the end because we know it's not always the most interesting thing for people to hear about conventions they didn't go to. Mm-hmm. But if it is interesting to you, we thought it was different enough from a lot of the other conventions that we've been to that it would be worth talking about.
Yeah, so this convention has been running for a few years now, and one of the things that makes it unique is that it is an invite-only convention. What that means is not like you have to pass a huge screening program, but to go to Whose Turn, you have to know somebody who goes, and they'll give you an invite, and it's pretty simple to get in. You know, they haven't, like, restricted it as, like, only one person can be invited, so on and so forth at any given time. But being an invite-only convention has really allowed them to make this a more casual and open convention. One of the things that was most interesting to me about this is the way that they dealt with bringing in games and with their game library. They had maybe 2 shelves worth of actual game library from Whose Turn, but everybody else was encouraged to bring their games and leave them out on a section of the shelves that wrapped all the way around the convention space and both of the side rooms. Everybody, you know, most people brought 5 to 20 or so games in, and you put them under a little sign with your name on it saying these games belong to Jake and Danielle Bach, so on and so forth. And you're encouraged to just kind of go around, play games, meet new people, and pick up games that you might not have had a chance to play otherwise and get them to the table. That's how we got a lot of the stuff that we played at Whose Turn this weekend, for example, like the Star Wars Carcassonne. We finally got to play Coimbra and some games like that that are either hard to find or games that I don't want to take an immediate dive on just to, know if I get a chance to play them or not.
The fact that you needed to essentially have known somebody else who thought you were a good person to invite to this convention allowed a certain sense of personal accountability, but also an ease about leaving your games out to be played by anybody that was very different from anything else that I can remember. Even in conventions where we know a lot of folks that are local conventions, just because everybody is under the same sort of, I don't want to say scrutiny, because it's not scrutiny. It's just everybody is under the same idea that you can play other people's games and that's great and fun, but don't mess them up.
Yeah,
because
it's respect.
That is the respect that we are all buying into.
Yeah. And it was a really interesting way to have a convention also because we were so comfortable the whole time, and it was really a great opportunity to play games with literally anybody. A number of times throughout the weekend where we were setting up a game, and we have, like, with 3 players for Wingspan, and another person walked by, and like, hey, you want to get on this thing? And just sat down and like, yeah, I guess so. It was really easy to find players, and it's such a comfortable size. I think it was maybe 350 to 400 people for this. So we started off in an interesting place with our con experience. The first real con we went to was Gen Con, and you can't really get any bigger than that. And it's fun in a way that we've been working our way to smaller and smaller conventions as time goes on.
Well, those smaller conventions are a lot better for getting games played. One of the things you'll hear, I know we say it, but a lot of people who talk about Gen Con will say this: you don't go to Gen Con to play games. You go to Gen Con to see games or to buy games or to find out what's going to be released later. You don't go to Gen Con to bring a bunch of games and then sit down with your friends and have a great time. There are a lot cheaper and less stressful ways to do that. These smaller conventions, though, are a much more fun way to get games to the table, to play games that you love, to play games that maybe you haven't been able to play for a long time, with people you either don't often play with or have never met before.
So I really kind of have to give it to small conventions. This is something that we're trying to get to more and more, and there's a number coming up in our area and other areas that I would encourage everybody out there to take a look at. One resource that I found really surprising, if you go to the website tabletop.events, you can actually see a lot of people that are using their event registration system, and there's a whole bunch of conventions of that smaller few hundred size throughout the country. I think they had 40 or 50 conventions through the first half of the year that are available there. So you might take a look on there and see what's available in your area and get to some of these smaller conventions. So to go back to Whose Turn, what particularly about Whose Turn, other than the library, did you find really appealing?
I liked the idea that it was sort of its own set-up play space for the entire weekend. We saw a group that was running through one of the time story scenarios that was one of the longer ones. And they got to the point at the end of the night where they were beat, and they needed to go back to their hotel and go to sleep. They left the game out on the table with a little sign that said, "In mid-play, we'll be back tomorrow. Please leave this alone. Don't clean it up for us." And they came back the next morning, and it was still there, and it was fine. There was an area that was sort of walled off from the main convention room space that was the quiet area. So if you wanted a space that you could play a game in and not have to worry about feeling overwhelmed by people, it was also available to you in that sort of separate space. They had tournaments running all weekend. This was the kind of event that was a full 4 days worth of games. Now, you could buy 2-day passes, actually for any of the combinations of 2 days, I think. But it felt like you could just go, and once you got there, you were there until you left. Like that was a whole extended experience, as opposed to when we go to a lot of other conventions, it feels like, okay, this is one chunk of it is this day, and one chunk of it is the next day. This felt like one long, drawn-out experience, which was really nice.
Yeah. I was a really big fan of having the quiet room specifically. I have a hard time grokking a new game or learning from a rule book in, like, the middle of Gen Con or something like that, those giant rooms, because there's just so much distraction going on. But being able to sit down in that quiet room and pull out something heavier and really just get a good feel for it. We learned Dice Settlers, we learned Coimbra, we learned a bunch of different new games there, and it was really quick and easy to do so because we had that quiet room to kind of be off to the side in. We picked up Keyforge, which we will actually be talking about in the future, for example. Yes, I played Keyforge.
In addition to the big gaming spaces that they had and the tournaments, they had a couple of other different activities that I think really added to the value of the convention. They had a flea market on Saturday where you could bring in any games that you wanted to sell and price them as you wanted. People would walk through, and you could it was an hour where you could sell and buy games that you wanted, and there were some awesome games that were in there that you could just pick up, and we were able to get rid of some stuff that wasn't getting played in our collection. We definitely also bought some stuff. Not gonna say we didn't. But I feel like it was a really nice flea market, and it was a flea market with a bunch of people who were at this already invite convention, so nobody was trying to be like, I'll give you 50 cents for that $50 game. Like, people appreciated the value of games, which I thought was really neat. There was also a booth set up from Cape Fear Games, so they had brought down a bunch of their stock that they were selling, just because they're sorry, I didn't say this, they're a game store down in Cape Fear. Yeah, they were in Wilmington. So they had brought a bunch of their stock that you could peruse through, and if you bought a certain value of games from them, you were entered into a raffle for a gift card. So that was really nice. If you played a game that somebody else had brought and it was one of the newer games that were there, there was a chance that you could go over to the booth and go support a vendor that had brought some stock down and pick that game up right away. Or if there was something you really wanted to play that was new, and they could probably get it, and you could learn it right there, and everybody would get a chance to play it.
Yeah. So all in all, Whose Turn Is It Anyway is everything that I want out of a local con. I'm super glad we had the opportunity to go, and I'm absolutely going to be going again, if possible, any future year.
Oh, one of the other really cool things that is not applying to us in any way, but I thought was really neat, is that they had hired a sitting firm.
Oh, yeah.
There was like another walled-off area next to the quiet room where you could, if you had small children, you could essentially check your children in, and they had hired professional sitters to make sure that they were all right, so that the parents could get a little bit of gaming time in, separate from their kids. But they also had a kids event running the whole weekend, where there was sort of like a tournament among kids that were playing games, and there was a winner for that as well. It was really family friendly in that way, but you never really felt overrun, like, oh, this is a convention aimed at only family gamers. But it did integrate families really well, I feel like.
Really a lot of things to like there. So I would encourage all of you listeners out there, Check out your local cons. These smaller cons that don't have the marketing budget of an Origins, a PAX, or a Gen Con are worth your time, and you should probably see if you can get to some of them and just play a whole bunch of games. But whose turn is it anyway? A++ would con again. That pretty much brings us to the end of this episode. If you want to get in touch with us on the internet, draftmechanic.net is your one-stop shop for all your Draft Mechanic needs. At Draft Mechanic on your favorite social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And draftmechanic@gmail.com if you want to send us an email.
We do have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. Check that out for the thread on this episode or any other episode. And also check out the voting poll if you let us know. And also check out the voting poll if you want to let us know what expansions we should talk about in our upcoming Expandapalooza 2.
Woo!
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, our next game night is going to be on February 7th. That is a Thursday. It's at Good Road Cider Works. We would love for you to come out. They have excellent cider and mead. They've also got some local beer and some non-alcoholic beverages and snacks and everything. It is a great time. They have a good space. We would love for you to come out and play some games.
Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. All right, Danielle, I'm done. Bye.
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Bird puns.
Bye.
Good night. Draft Mechanic episode 94 is recorded on Sunday, February 3rd, 2019 in front of a live studio cat.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey, this is Patrick
And this is Eric
from
Patrick and Eric in the morning. Join us every now and again for about a half an hour as we freeform chat about whatever's on our minds and how it all relates back to our favorite hobby, board gaming.
Patrick and Eric in the Morning can be found on the What Did You Play This Week podcast feed and on the Punchboard Media site.
Happy listening.
Punchboard Media.
where we all
Bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair
At punchboardmedia.com.